Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Beats and Beans podcast with me, Sam Turner. Now, today's episode is a little chat I had with a mastering engineer called Stephen Kerrison. Now, if mastering is kind of a new concept to you, you're not entirely sure what that means, then definitely stay tuned because there's going to be loads of great information on what that even means. And then we dig a little bit deeper into what it actually means for Stephen personally. Now, something that's really hard to do as a creative is get a good work-life balance. And Stephen has a really good take on this and how he's actually managed to create a really nice work-life balance between him and his wife, who's also in the creative industry. Now, I'm not going to give too much away. Stephen does a really good job of explaining who he is and what a mastering engineer does. Stephen has very kindly allowed me to offer listeners of the podcast a 10% discount on all services from Stephen. So stay tuned and listen out for how to get that. And without further ado, here we go. So, first things first, from me, I do, of course, need to say thank you for being a customer, which is always amazing to me when people are involved and get behind it. So, thank you very much, first of all, number one.
Oh, a pleasure. I mean, it's, genuinely some of the nicest coffee I've had of late. I couldn't fault any of the three.
I'll snippet that up for a little ad later. Thank you very much. I'll slip you a $5 in the post. No, good stuff. You got one on the go at the minute? What are you drinking?
I finished all the stuff from you. That's long gone. But I have ordered some more. But today I've got a festive number actually on the go. I don't know whether you can see. I can't see my camera here, but we've got it's from Neighbourhood Coffee Roasters.
Love it. Neighbourhood are great. Really love them. Yeah.
It's beginning to look a latte like Christmas.
Brilliant. Love it. You got to love a pun, a musical-based pun. I'm a fan. You know, it's so funny actually. I discovered Neighbourhood after I'd kind of already set up Big Beats.
Yeah.
And I found them. I was like, oh, it's so annoying. They've got all these music pun-based coffee names. And the more I looked into them, I was like, I don't know why they've done this. They don't have anything else particularly like musical themed aside from the names. It's like, damn, they've just taken a really good idea, been selfish. So I might have to have a chat with them, do a collaborative number with them or something.
Yeah, you should totally do that. They're from around here. Like I'm up in Liverpool, and they're local to me.
Oh, I didn't know that. I've only had them served to me in other shops, so it's kind of how I know about them. I think I've had them ordered in the past, but yeah, no, really, really cool guys, really good roasters. I know they're very well respected, so I mean,
they're great. There's some good roasteries up here actually. There's like Neighbourhood's really, really nice, and there's 92 Degrees as well. Crosby Coffee, like
yes, they've opened up a new, whole new shop, haven't they, in Liverpool? Is that right?
Yeah, I think they've just opened something on Lark Lane, I think. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, again, they've just been a really good staple for the past few years. It's like you're going to get something nice.
It's nice to find places like that, but it's especially in coffee where the majority of it is awful. No matter where you go, even the big chains, you're always assured to get a pretty bad cup from somewhere. But you drink it anyway because it's there.
Yeah, I think as well, it's like it's definitely as much to do with how people make it. It doesn't really matter if you've got excellent coffee. If you don't really know how to make it, then it can still be hit and miss for sure.
100%. Yeah, you got to have the technique. I guess that kind of ties us into music straight away, right? Got to know what you're doing.
Yeah,
but,
true.
No, we'll get more into that. So I think first things first, just for those of us that haven't heard of you before, if you just give us like a 2-minute rundown of your story, how you got into music, and your role in it now, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, I've always been. So I started playing in bands, as we all do. When I was a teenager, and that was great, and really loved it, and I actively pursued it for many, many, many years to sort of varying degrees of success. And I kind of, a few years ago, it started to lose its appeal somewhat. And I had a big kind of crisis of like, oh no, but I've devoted my whole life to this. What am I going to do now? And I had a big spin out, and I sat with a really good friend of mine, and he said, right, what do you want? What do you want out of music? What do you want your day to look like? What kind of role do you what do you want? And I sort of talked him through it, and and without skipping a beat, he just went, you should be a mastering engineer. And I was like, I'd literally never thought about it. I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how you do that. So I spent the next however many years just like learning and getting set up and trying to get good, and which basically leads to where we are now. So about 3 years ago, me and the same friend built a studio in Liverpool to work from, finally. And that's where we are now.
Awesome. Good. So, I mean, I'm really interested to know what it was you said that made him jump to that conclusion. Like, what was it that you said that you wanted your career to look like, that he went mastering?
I can't even remember. I think it was more like, because I think my role in lots of previous like musical endeavours had been someone who, like, I always enjoyed taking raw ideas and kind of sculpting them into something that, resembled something of a song or something that felt powerful, and trying to kind of get the best out of everything. And I think there's a quite a big crossover with that for sure in mastering, sort of taking something and going, right, well, this is a brilliant thing in its raw form. How can we take it over the edge?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can definitely relate to the putting your heart and soul into being a band, and then that, you don't end up touring the world and being the next, XYZ massive band, and it's soul destroying, and you think, what else can I possibly do with my life? And then, you find something else. But I think that's just for those of us that maybe aren't too sure, because I think it is a bit of a dark art to some. What is mastering, or at least what is mastering to you? How do you think of it?
Well, I think of it, I mean, you're right in that I think a lot of people do still think of it as a dark art, and I think that's the result of many years of gatekeeping and secret keeping and all that sort of stuff. And it doesn't have to be a dark art, I don't think. To me, I see it as the last point in the process of making a record where you get to make creative decisions. It's like the last bit. Now, obviously that's developed over time. That's not what mastering used to be considered. Used to be considered what it was. It used to be seen as simply the transferring of the medium that the music had been recorded on to the medium that it would be distributed on and listened to on. So it was quite it was a technical process. It was a relatively dry process. There were things that you had to do in order to make that transition. But I think modern mastering has a little bit more creative input in it, or it certainly has the opportunity to, if you find the right person.
And that's what you're all about, right? I mean, I've seen on your website, like, the first thing you see is creative mastering. Like, you make quite a point of that. And so I guess, is that a way of you trying to kind of, find your niche and your people, right? People that specifically want creative input rather than someone who's just going to, limit it, get it ready for Spotify, wherever it might need to be, actually have some creative input and fresh ears and ideas to bring to the table. Yeah,
definitely. That's exactly it. It's about finding the people who want that. Because, I mean, not everybody wants it. It's not there certainly isn't a right way to do it or a wrong way to do it or anything like that. I mean, it's one thing I find consistently just lovely about the music industry and what we're all trying to do, because essentially, we're all trying to do exactly the same thing. We're all trying to get to exactly the same point. We just want like an amazing sounding record that's going to do really, really well. And we're all doing it completely differently, like totally differently, which is why these conversations are always so fun. Because, no two people have the same approach, really, at any point.
It. Yeah, there's no rule book, right, which is a blessing and an absolute beast sometimes, I suppose, because you can feel lost when there's no rule book and there's absolutely no boundaries. Sometimes you can get a bit like flustered with all that. So I think while it's absolutely an amazing thing, it can sometimes make it hard to make what you think to be the right decision, I think, creatively, because there just isn't one really. So sometimes you have to question yourself, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a thing that definitely appealed to me about mastering, and that still does, is that there are still a set of technical parameters that you need to know and that you need to work to, and kind of there is a lot of creative freedom, but it does also come with a set of quite strict, quite unmovable goalposts in lots of ways. So I kind of, for me personally, I like that. I like those boundaries, because I think in mixing and production, like it's all off the table. You can, there's so much room to go down as many rabbit holes as you like, and that's not good for the way I work.
Okay, so you like to have that kind of narrower focus, clearer end goal, like something you can get to with tunnel vision. Just absolutely.
I think so, because it's so tempting, because it's so easy and so accessible to just kind of go, well, I'm going to try this. Oh, and I'm going to try this, and I'm going to try. Right, there's 100 different ways to do this. I'm going to try them all. And yeah, I just get lost.
You know what? It reminds me of a story. One of the first bands I ever mixed, the guitarist was a friend of ours, and we were just so deep into these mixes, it was not even enjoyable anymore. And we got to a point where we thought, yeah, this is done, right? This is finished. And he sat at the back of the room and he went, yeah, but we haven't tried everything yet. I was like, what do you mean? Like, is that what you're waiting for? Like, you want 2,000 different mixes so you can pick the best one, so you can say that you've tried everything, so you've got the most for your money. And that's where I was like, yeah, that's not a good thing. Like having all these options and actually wanting to use them all. And lo and behold, that music did not ever come out. So there you go. there's a lesson to be there. I think it definitely doesn't hurt to know that yes, there's unlimited possibilities in music, but to combine that with some focus and like some vision and end goal to try and get to. And I think helps.
I think that's the role of a mastering engineer these days, in particular.
That's interesting.
It's the ability to like, so for example, you're talking about these mixes, and you said yourself you're so far into them, you didn't know which way was up anymore. Now, if you were to send them to myself or someone who's working in this similar role, we have none of that baggage, like absolutely none. So we can just listen to it and just go, that snare's a bit loud, and that's it. Like that's all we'll hear. We won't have any. There's like no emotional attachment to it up to that point. So, like, I sort of always talk about the snare because it's really funny. Like, I wouldn't hear the hours and hours and hours of tweaking that snare. I'd just hear that it's a bit loud. Like, that's it. And I think it's really important at that stage of the process to have someone who's completely impartial and just doesn't have that kind of like, they can just see it for what it is and just go, well, yeah, that it's a bit off balance or whatever,
Yeah, fresh set of ears, because I guess everyone else up to that point, producer like myself or mixer or the band, they're not hearing the end result. They are hearing the hours of labour that have gone into making that snare sound. Like I'm hearing every EQ move and bit of compression that I've done, and you can't unhear those things. And so, yeah, it does just take someone fresh ears, even sometimes not necessarily someone that knows anything about music. Like, I think my wife, she's been my best critic for years. She doesn't know anything about music technically, but she'll listen to it and goes, well, that's a bit this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
But you can't see the obvious stuff when you're that deep in, can you?
No, you can't. I mean, I learned it a long time ago. I think with me, I was doing a band years and years and years ago, and I remember me and the singer or something, we were learning how to do these, how to mix and stuff like that, and we were in the same thing. We'd done it and we'd spent ages on it, and we were like, oh, this is great, and then we played it to somebody else, and they just went, oh yeah, it's good, that hi-hat's very loud, and we were like, oh god, it is. I hadn't even noticed. We sort of so focused on everything else that we hadn't noticed that the hi-hat was about 12 dB louder than it needed to be.
Yeah, you can't see the wood for the trees, can you? When you're that
exactly
deep? But that's all part of the fun, and I guess part of the reason and the benefits to getting more people involved and collaborating and getting more ears and stuff. And
Sure.
I think we'll come on to a little bit more of that later. I've got a question for you, but just until we get to that, I just want to ask you if it's actually easy to explain what your particular mastering process looks like. Do you have a go-to where you load a track up and you just know straight away you're going to do X, Y, and Z, or is it all completely different? What does mastering look like to you on a day-to-day?
Well, I think expanding on what we just talked about, for me, first impressions are really, really important. So you only get that first listen once. So for me, there's always a conversation before I'll start mastering. I'll try and speak to the artist, or speak to the producer, or speak to the mix engineer, and just try and establish what they're going for, and try and sort of ask them if they've been working to reference tracks. Sometimes it's really obvious. Because the advantage of doing what I did, which was actually starting quite late, is that I had many years of being just a completely obsessive music fan, sort of under my belt. That was done. So now at least I know when someone sends me a track, I've got reference points to go to, because I'll go, I sort of recognise what kind of thing this is and what kind of music it is. But I usually ask for specific reference tracks, any kind of notes they can give me about what they are looking to achieve, anything like that. And then, so based on that, I usually spend a few minutes before the session. So I'll get into the studio, I will load up those reference tracks, or I will load up something that, that they've sent, and listen to it, and have a cup of coffee.
Good man.
And then at that point, I just go, right, I'm ready. I'll pull up the track and play it. And most of the decisions that end up being the final ones will usually take place in the first run through.
So it's almost like instinct, would you call it that? As soon as you press play, you're hearing things and your mind's going, okay, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to tame this, boost this, and you just straight away you're on that,
Yeah, because I try and prime my ears before going in. So then I'm just ready, and I just kind of go, I can hear that. I don't touch anything for a little while. I don't, which is so tempting to do that, but I really try not to. I sort of just sit back. I've got my studio set up so my listening spot is just out of reach of the keyboard, so I can sit back and listen to it, and then make some mental notes. Yeah, and then just start playing. And it is usually, you get, I think there's a quote in, I think it's Bob Katz's book or something that I always think about, where he says, you get the last 10% of the job takes 90% of the time.
Yes, it does. Yeah, 100%. And I think that exists kind of in each of our respective roles, our part of it, and the actual end product, I guess. I
think so.
Yeah, you definitely feel that when you've cracked out. You might have written and produced a song inside of a day, but actually getting that next 10%, getting it mixed, mastered, released, promote, all those things.
Yeah.
It just takes so long, and I think you need to keep some perspective to not go out of your mind with that, and realize how small your part might be and how much more there is to go, and focus on the bigger picture. So I think that's a good mindset to go in with.
Definitely. And sometimes the bigger picture for me is to just not do very much at all.
How hard is that? I need to know, because that for me is like the temptation to think I need to do more. I need to press more buttons, do more things. Like that for me took a lot of like maturing and discipline.
Yeah, it takes ages. Yeah, when I was first starting doing this, I was just like, cool, I think I can probably find a role for like every one of my plugins on this, and it's like, obviously that's just ridiculous. And you kind of get to the point where I always try and do as little as possible. And I'm not saying that I don't mean that as a kind of like, I don't mean I don't want to do a significant amount. I just mean I want it to be done in as fewer moves as possible, and I want each of those moves to mean something.
Yeah, 100%.
Rather than lots and lots of kind of little things. So I definitely use less processing now, but than I did when I was first starting out. But I feel I get much more meaningful results from that.
Yeah, I think that speaks to kind of maturity, and it takes experience to really get there and realize how little you can get away with, because it's so easy to overcook these things, isn't it? At every stage of the process. But less is more. I mean, that just goes such a long way. Just a good mindset to have.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe do you worry as a Martian engineer about stepping on the toes of the producer if you make too big a call in one sense? Worried that you're going to send something back and the mix is going to go, what on earth have you done here? Like, do you worry about that at all?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. It's I do, because we both want to. So myself and a mix engineer are obviously both trying. Again, it's like we were saying before. We're both trying to achieve exactly the same thing. Now, if I get a mix that I feel I have to do quite a lot with, I know a lot of mastering engineers will kick the mix back and just go like, hey, could you try and sort this out? And I do that, but a lot of the time you don't really get an opportunity to, because you're not in direct contact with the mix engineer. And a lot of the time, if you're working with artists so I've worked with a lot of independent artists who, they'll have mixed the track themselves. And if you're asking, like a lot of the time, if you ask them to do something, they just simply might not really know how to do what you're asking them to do. They might not understand really what you're asking. And so a lot of the time, I think more often than not, I'll just give it a go. And if it's really something that, that I don't think's working, then I'll get it to a state where I think is good. And then I'll send the first draft and go, look, here's where we are. If you could go back to the mix and sort out these things, I think this could be a little bit better. But it sounds pretty good as it is. It's kind of up to your taste, really.
So understanding the context of who you're working with, if it's someone that is a mastering and is a mixing engineer, can make those decisions, then that's an option. So understanding who you're working with, I think again that's kind of a maturity thing. I don't think you necessarily get that and make those correct decisions when you're quite early on in your career. Sort of really understanding who you're working with, what they want, what they're capable of, what they're trying to achieve, what resources they have.
Yeah, and so it's all communication. It's just all about that. Like I don't think there can be, there almost can't be enough. It's sort of, and a lot of the time, a phone call or a Zoom or something is it's just so helpful, because it condenses 50 emails into 10 minutes, which is lovely. So I really like that. I really like sort of, getting a feel for who I'm working with, for sure.
Yeah, my production partner, Sam Jump, he always says he can't do WhatsApp and email and things. He will always call. And I think it's the right thing to do, actually. He said, stop messaging me. It's a coward's way out. If you want to say something, just give me a ring and we can get everything ironed out in a minute. And things like voice notes, he can't stand them. And I think he's probably right, to be honest. But it is quite funny. But you're so right, though. Like, communication is just so key. And I actually listened to something, it was a podcast I was listening to. I can't quite remember who it was. It was earlier today. They're talking about communication, and it really does just make the world go round. Like, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, it's all people communicating and talking, and it really is key. And that's actually like the real underlying concept, but behind this whole coffee thing that I come up with. Like, the coffee is very much the facilitator and the face of it, but it's actually all about communication, conversation, kind of learning through experience and sharing stories and stuff. So that exactly why I'm doing this podcast, is to really get to the heart of what this whole brand is all about. So I'm really glad that you've said that. You've kind of hit the nail on the head. And I think what I'm actually really interested to know is for you as a mastering engineer, and my understanding of this is that it's quite a solitary job. Like, I mean, even a lot of the mixing work I do, I'm rarely doing it with anyone attended. So how do you kind of navigate that? And is that a pro to you or a con? Like, do you find yourself wanting to have more networking opportunities, or are you quite an introverted person and that actually really works for you?
Well, in terms of the actual daily work, I'm quite happy being by myself a lot of the time. I do stuff attended, but it's usually when, so if there's an artist that particularly wants to be involved and wants to be present and wants to be there, or if it's a band who are, they're local or something like that, and they want to come and see the process, I do a kind of like, I offer them a sort of like a halfway, where I go, okay, cool, well, I'll do the processing on my own and get it to a point where you're happy with the way everything sounds. And then we can all get into the room together and we can put, like, so obviously this only really works with albums or EPs, and then we'll piece it all together, like, all in the room, and we'll get the gaps right, and we'll get the track markers right, and we'll get the rhythm of how the whole thing's going to flow. Like, we can do that as like a collaborative creative process, and it's really lovely. Like, I've done it a few times now and I love it. Like, it's such a cool thing to do. But I think I prefer working by myself when I'm actually getting into the, like, some of it's super interesting to me, but if someone was sitting behind me watching what I was doing in like RX or something, it's like, I mean, they'd just be asleep, or it'd be so boring. So my dog Pipe, sort of, he sits there whilst I do all that stuff. He's he helps out with that.
Always nice to have an assistant, isn't it?
Yeah, really good with high frequencies. Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, from a day-to-day thing, it's, I'm quite happy to work kind of by myself. I think it's quite nice. My studio's like a 10-15 minute walk away from my house, so I can walk there and do some work and then come back, and it's lovely. There's no big commute or anything like that. And but I think the way it potentially becomes a problem that it's so solitary is if you feel like you're an island doing this stuff. And I think the thing that's really, really helped me over the past few years is simply reaching out to other engineers and other producers, other mastering engineers, and just sort of saying, hey, how's it going? And just getting up a rapport and getting up a friendship and getting up a relationship with other people who are working in your field. Because, if you were in an office, you'd have colleagues to chat to about your irks or any problems you're having, or if anything like that. And when you're working like this, you don't have that. So creating a network of people who you really like, who are working in the same field, even if they're, nowhere near you physically, I think it's a really good thing to do, really healthy.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of the wonders of the internet, because that's kind of what I wanted to get into, because like I know that for me, the people I meet along the way in music is a huge, I'd say it's a perk of the job, right? I just meet some unbelievably interesting people. But that's because I'm in lots of different rooms with lots of different people for a long time as well. Because I might be working with an artist for months on end, potentially even years if it's a long project. And some of the artists I still work with now I've met years ago.
Yeah.
So I have that, and I was always really interested to know, as a mastering engineer, where you're largely doing a lot of the work by yourself, and it's largely through emails and potentially calls, but then also there's quite a high turnover, right? Like you might work with, I don't know how busy you are, but 10, 20 different songs or artists a week, and it's kind of quite low friction. The song comes in, it goes out. That kind of relationship element is possibly harder to build. So I was kind of interested in, how that works for you. Like, is that something that is actually a good thing, or you'd like to get more involved with artists? But I think you've kind of explained it, like reaching out to other engineers in the same boat, and kind of seeing where they're at with everything.
Yeah, I think the relationships with the artists and producers and stuff is kind of, it's something that I think that I really place value on in what I do and what I kind of offer to people, because I think you're right, it is a really high turnover. And, but the last thing I'd want to do is to think of this like a conveyor belt and just think of it just like, right, in, cool, done, right, out. I don't want that. That's not creative, in my opinion. So being able to just slow down a bit and just go, okay, well, obviously I'm not going to be working with people for months like you, but like, let's talk about this at every stage and make sure that, just make sure that I'm actually providing something of value to people at this stage. Because, if you want to get your track mastered, there are plenty of ways to do it these days that are very quick and very convenient and very cheap. So yeah, it's kind of finding a way to add an experience to that, I think.
Yeah, 100%, totally get it. I kind of think the same ways, but I think unfortunately with some of the downside to some of the technological advances that we've seen is, convenience has obviously gone through the roof, but not necessarily quality, but people will pay for convenience. So you have to find an edge, right? You have to find something, and the one thing that you've kind of always got is your personality, the relationships that you can build, and so I think they really become part of your business model, right? Like being a person to go to, and while there's always going to be those out there that just want to add to cart, upload it, see what comes back.
Yeah,
I think I can sleep at night quite happily knowing that most people want someone, they want a person, right? They want someone they can talk to. If they've got a problem with what's come out, there's a relationship there, right?
Yeah, I think, for sure. It's certainly not everyone, but so you said, you've got to try and find an edge. Now, for me, I don't necessarily think of it as an edge, but I feel like I've got to try and find my people. I've got to find the people who, because if someone does want that and that's the way they like working, they create the track and they just, they want to upload it, they want it to come back sounding, as far as, the algorithms are concerned, like sounding correct, then that's fine. Like, that's, I don't have a problem with that. But I'll never convince that person to, like, if you pay a few extra quid, you could work with me and we could get a better result. I could never convince them. And that's totally fine. So it's just a case of like, of just making, just finding the people who want what you're offering, and providing them something that means something to them. I mean, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Because I think once you've done that, you have built a relationship, even if it is only over the course of, a couple of days and 10 emails. It's something that people remember.
Yeah, no, 100%. I absolutely love that. And, not trying to convince the unconvincible. It's a big waste of time.
Yeah, totally.
And just finding your thing, your niche, and just going hard at that, saying, look, this is what I do. If it's not for you, fine. Like that is absolutely fine. You can't. Yeah, it's not. It's not your job to change people's minds. And
No.
When we do production, we certainly think the same. Like the artists that we actually do end up working with, we don't really go for numbers. Like there's not many of them. Like there's only so like once we narrow it down from genre and where they are in their career and actually where they want to go, like the list of people we can actually help is not very big at all.
No.
But when we find those that we can help, just absolutely put everything into making sure that that happens. And I think that's quite a nice way to run what you do. And for me, I think is what gets to sort of kind of bring me to my next question, but what I feel where success can be found as for me as a producer is definitely in that, knowing that I could truly help a small portion of people and really putting everything into that. And so that kind of brings me to my next question, which for you, what does being a successful mastering engineer look like? I think we've all got different career goals. And so I'm really interested, and it's a question that I've had in a few of these chats, and there's a nice variation of answers. So I'm really interested to see what you think of that, what being successful means to you.
I think in terms of like the service and the experience that you provide, I think for me, doing a successful job for someone is to send them away with a product that they're 100% confident with, and that they know that, like, cool, if I hadn't have gone to this person, I wouldn't have been as sure about this, and now I'm just like, yeah, this is going to be a killer. Because, like, you need that as an artist. Like, you need that. Like, if you're not, I mean, having been there myself, like, if you're not absolutely 100% behind what you're doing, you're never going to get anywhere. So if I can help that, and I can send people on their way absolutely full of confidence that they've got a banger, that's it. That's a successful job as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that your focus there was just totally on who you're servicing, not, that was a very selfless explanation of that, which I really like, and I think speaks volumes to the kind of people that I want to work with, certainly, that, it is a help others industry, kind of.
We're facilitators. Yeah. Like me and you, this what we're doing is kind of like, we're facilitating people's creativity. And it's just, that's important. Like, these things are just like, like when I master someone's song, even if it's just like a single or something, you just think like, this is why I never want it to feel like a conveyor belt, because this is like, it's like the most important thing someone could have done in their life. Like, it means so much to them. And like, you've got to respect that. Otherwise it's like, yeah, like what are you doing?
Yeah. And that responsibility is I find actually quite rewarding, right?
Me too.
Someone coming to you with that trust. There's a bit of pressure, but it's like, yeah, this is why I do it. Like, this is great. This feels good. Yeah,
it's like, it's a total honour to be trusted with this stuff. Like, because there's a ton of people making music, and there's a ton of people doing, what we do. So for that artist or that producer to go, yeah, like I like your vibe or whatever. Like, let's go with this. It means a lot.
Yeah, totally, man. Totally get it. Let's segue from there for a second. I'm really interested to move into how, I mean, you've got this great career in music set up, and how that actually affects your life outside of music. And the reason I ask that is just because from a personal experience, like, it's hard. Music doesn't just stop in the studio. It kind of, it seeps into one of your relationships, and like, I know
it's leaky, isn't it?
It's tough. It's because here's where it comes from. When you do something you love for work, then it's very hard for it to stay at work. And you know, it's not an industry where, at least for me, where, you know, a 9 to 5 is long gone. And so the hardest thing for me is structuring my life and time with my wife. Like, it's so difficult to do, and that's tough. And that for me sometimes become the hardest part of working in music, is actually what happens outside of it, like the sacrifices that sometimes you have to make. And I don't know whether you found it maybe more being in a band. That was when it was really hard for me, like trying to, you know, try and tour, that you don't try and do gigs away, those kind of things. Like, they suck up so much of your time and energy.
Yeah.
That you either haven't got time for your loved ones, or when you do, you're exhausted and not in the mood. And that's been a real kind of journey for me. So I'm always keen to ask people about, you know, how music affects the rest of your life.
Well, yeah, I mean, those things that you just mentioned about touring, I mean, that started to get too much, frankly. And so did a fair bit of touring, and it's kind of, I mean, I used to love it. Like, I used to absolutely love it. It's just amazing. And I don't regret it for a second. Like, all the stuff that I've done, you know, as a performing musician in the past, like, you know, I've seen so much of the world, and, you know, it's just amazing. Like, I did love it. But it just got to the point where, and it's like, you know, people say, oh, it's a young man's game. I always used to think that they meant, like, oh, because they're getting, like, old and tired and decrepit and they can't handle it anymore. And I realised that's not it at all. It's just once you've got, like, for me, it was like, it was getting a dog. Like, so when I got my dog, so we moved to Liverpool and we got a dog, and then I did a couple of short tours, and they were really lovely, and they were with really nice people. I was doing like a session, like a bit of session playing. They were really lovely, but I was finding myself at the door with, like, my bag and my pedal case and my guitar on my back, going, oh, I just don't really want to go. Like, even though I do want to go, I don't really want to go. And I think it kind of, that's where that came from. And I think doing this now is a lot more manageable, purely because there's no travel. So, like, having a studio-based job is, like, a lot more manageable. So my wife is a creative artist. So she's obviously self-employed, and, you know, we're both kind of in a similar situations in that. And we have our dog, and we have a 2-year-old. So managing 2 freelance creative careers, like, whilst looking after, like, a full family unit, obviously takes a bit of organisation and a bit of push and pull. So the way we've got it laid out is that we just split the week in half, and that's it. So we each have 3 full days where we can work, and then a day where we all hang out together. Nice.
You've actually got some teamwork going and works out something that works. And I mean, I'm really glad that you have done that, because that's a great example for for those listening that are struggling with that work-life balance, and particularly with relationships. Like, a bit of teamwork, work out a structure, and it goes a long way, right? Because things get tough when you haven't got that, and
for sure. And also, like, this, these jobs are kind of like freelance work in the audio industry is, I mean, that's tough. Like it is just hard, and it's you know, and it's same with Sorrel, my wife. I mean, she works as a creative artist, and it's like the lack of stability sometimes can really kind of upset the apple cart, as they say. It's it can do your head in.
Yeah, big time. It's so funny you mention your dog. Like that for me, what a turning point, getting dogs. Wow. It's like, I mean, I haven't got a child, so this is probably not a particularly fair comparison, but it felt like I'd taken on the responsibility and the time of having a child. Like it's round the clock. Like it was, it's tough. And I decided that one wasn't enough and I should do it all over again. So I've got a new puppy at the moment, and what a fool I've been. But no, I mean, you know, you love them to bits, and you know that it's a sacrifice worth making, I suppose. But
I thought that though when we got our puppy, I was just like, do you know what? Like, how much harder can like having a baby be than this? Like, surely this is as hard as it gets. And like, yeah, I think it does. I mean, yeah, the answer is like loads, but I think it does kind of. I think I'd have found it all a lot harder had we not had that experience actually with having a puppy first.
Bit of training,
yeah,
bit of practice, yeah. No, it's funny you meant like you talk about the you know, the lows of a creative career. You know, essentially, how I think of it is not having enough work, not actually really having a creative outlet. Like when that's what you do, but you haven't got the opportunities coming in, and even for me now, like, you know, my kind of schedule it's up and down. You know, I have really busy months and I have weeks where I've just not really got anything on, and they're really tough. And it's normally my wife that kind of has to deal with that, because I'll get the ump and I'm like, oh God, what am I doing? Like I haven't got, like when your creativity has just got a plug on it, it's got nowhere to go because you've just got no work coming in. Yeah, which I think happens to all of us. Yeah, that's tough. And I don't think I've found the answer to that yet, how to really deal with that. 'Cause I mean, I've got quite good at just generally being healthier, looking after myself and dealing with my emotions a lot better. But I'm only really, really good at that when I'm busy and I'm motivated and things are actually looking up. When things start to dry up, I haven't cracked that yet. That for me is a big weak spot. And I don't feel like I'm alone in that, but it's a tough time, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of, it's so, I think it's incredibly difficult, and it seems to be incredibly difficult for people like us to separate your own worth and how you value yourself with how much money you're making and how much work you've got. Like, because those two things shouldn't really be correlated, but they really are when you're doing this kind of thing. Like, you can't, you know, your self-worth is definitely tied to how much money you're putting on the table, and that's not healthy.
Yeah, it's super tough, and when it dries up, and you're that. Yeah, the financial element, absolutely a massive part of it. You know, when you're struggling to provide in that sense, you're like, yeah, what am I doing? Like, is this working? You know, and then you just take a bit of a dive. You start to question you know, like you say, your self-worth and why you're doing it. Should you be doing something else? And you think, well, if I was that great at this, I wouldn't be here. I'd be busy, in demand, flush with cash. Like you kind of, and you spiral, you know. And I've been there and done that, and it's not fun.
No, but I think there's a lot of like, I think it's a lot to do with. I think the longer you do it, the more you start to see things in bigger chunks. Like, you don't see things in weeks anymore. You start seeing them in months, and then after a while you start seeing them in years, and you sort of go, okay, well, I am having a quiet week, but that's okay, because I know that like the form of the last few years will tell me that it's okay, this is going to pick up again. And it just takes loads of time, and I think it takes a slight shift in mindset as well about like coming from a place of lack. You always think about, oh no, I haven't got work, and and all that, that kind of lack mindset. And after a while, you've been doing it for so long, you realise, what, there's just so much music. There's enough to go round. It's okay. Like the thing will come. I just need to keep doing what I'm doing, and the things that have brought success before will probably keep bringing success if you just keep plugging away at them.
Yeah, I say what you mean. I say I say very similar things. That when someone comes to me with this kind of worry, like exactly what I'm explaining now, I've got all the advice under the sun. When it's me, I can't tell myself those things. I can't.
Yeah.
It's so much harder to say something like that to yourself, and even though it seems like so simple and obvious, but
that's why we all need to keep talking to each other. This is exactly what I was talking about before. Like this is why we need to have this network of don't see your peers as competition. Like see them as community, and everybody just has a nicer time.
Yeah, 100%. In a creative world, that's it. It's collaboration rather than competition, at least in that relationship sense, right? No, dude, I mean that's really great. I think I'm also really interested to know what you think about, just as we sort of start to wrap this up, how you see the future of music. And so by that I mean there's a few facets. There's the future of how music is made, what kind of I know there's a lot of shortcuts, and technology makes things way easier for producers and artists, and you've got this bedroom producer rise, and maybe there's a case there of roles being taken out of the music production process. And then you've also got the other side of that, which is how is music being consumed. I mean that's obviously changed massively within our lifetimes. I don't think is going to stop anytime soon. So I'm really curious to know, just kind of hypothetically or a complete guesswork, where you think the future of the music industry might be, what it might look like.
Well, I don't even know really where to start. I mean, I think there'll always be a role for individuals who work creatively, because making music is a creative endeavor. Like it just is. So there's always going to, I mean, good music is like good music comes from people's creative ideas, and it comes from their passions, and it comes from their it comes from them. It comes from inside them, and it's like, so I think the role of people still being on hand to offer their creative input and to make something that really hits on a human level, I don't think will ever go away. I think the kind of automated stuff will continue. I can't really see that going anywhere, but I kind of feel like it's two different things, really. Because people talk about the accessibility of music production software, and every computer you buy has got GarageBand on it, if it's a Mac. So it's everyone's got access to this stuff, and I think I don't really know how to articulate this. I think it's quite a common thinking that means there's tons of music producers, and I don't think that's true. I think there's tons of people who enjoy playing with this stuff and making tunes and things like that. And that's cool. And they, sure, they want to make something great, and they'll probably use the automated mastering services because it'll kick something back that's sort of, competitive in a, in a loudness sense and stuff like that. But I kind of see that as a different thing. And I'm not saying it was worse, or I'm not saying it's, it's silly or anything like that. I just think it's different to to four people getting in a room and writing a song and recording it however they want to record it. It's that kind of collaborative human process is quite different, I think. And I don't think the two things are necessarily in competition with each other. I just think they're different. So that's my quite badly articulated thoughts on that.
No, that's great. I think you're absolutely right. Like the world is abundant enough for both of those worlds to exist, quite peacefully.
Because some people just like plugins. Like,
yeah, I personally, I'm a plug-in man. I can't really get on with hardware too well. I always find it located in the worst part of the room.
I don't mean versus hardware necessarily. I just mean like they just like plugins. They like playing with the plugins. It's almost like they like playing with the plugins more than they like making the music. It's just a kind of like, it's like a tinkering thing. You know what I mean? And again, there's like all this stuff is accessible. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think to sort of go like, oh God, there's millions of music producers. It's like, I think there's millions of people playing with the software, but I still think there's still room for people to sort of be making music in more traditional ways. Okay, here's a thought. I don't think in 50 years' time anyone's going to be watching like a 6-hour documentary about someone playing with GarageBand.
Interesting.
Like, people are fascinated by this new Beatles documentary, like absolutely fascinated by it. Like however many years later, like that's what, like people are still finding that so interesting. So the idea that like, music's just going to be all computers and all automated, like I just can't see it. People still love it too much.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the modern equivalent is, I don't know. Think about how many people love. The way Phineas, Billie Eilish, the way they worked, they kind of done that whole bedroom thing, I guess, didn't they? And that you compare that to the scale Beatles were making stuff on, Abbey Road and all the gear and things. They're two kind of worlds apart. I think they're both interesting in their own right.
Me too. And I think there's similarities to draw.
Talent, I think, is the biggest one. Like people will always enjoy the products of unbelievably talented people. Yeah.
But I think it's about, for me, those. I mean, that's quite an interesting comparison because both of those artists, it's quite. I've heard this said quite a few times. Like, people use the first Billie Eilish record as a kind of as an example as to why automated mastering services won't work properly. Because if you gave those mixes to an automated mastering services, they would just go, there's too much bass in there, we'll level it all out and all the rest of it. Like those decisions to make that record sound the way it does are creative human decisions. And that's what the Beatles were doing at the best points in their career. They were breaking things, they were doing things wrong, they were sort of pushing those boundaries, and there's still people doing that. But yeah, they're human decisions.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I guess you can definitely make computers and AI and all this, you can make them smarter and smarter and smarter. Sometimes it takes a bit of stupidity to do something really cool, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what music's all about.
It is, yeah, and there's definitely room for that stuff. Like I do think there's a way for these things to coexist. Like absolutely, it's I'm not saying like, oh no, all these automated things are all, oh no, old man shouts at cloud. I'm not doing that.
No, I love that. I think it's good because sometimes that kind of and you see that attitude, don't you? And it often comes from, let's say, some of the more old school guys who have had it not necessarily easy, but they're very used to certain things in a certain way that have worked for them, and they're not particularly interested in these new things coming along. But I think the more you can potentially open those things with welcome arms, you might see there's an opportunity there. You might have missed if you just completely turn your back on it. Or like you say, realise that it's actually two completely different worlds. They can coexist. Yeah,
I mean, I think the thing. I mean, you talk about how people, you mentioned how people consume music. I think that. I mean, the way music is being listened to, like the music industry is so different to the way it was like 10 years ago, let alone 20 years or 30 years or 40 years ago. Like, so the idea that despite the industry changing so drastically, that you still have to make the music in exactly the same way as you did 30 years ago is mad. Like, of course that stuff's going to evolve as well, and things are going to be different. Like, and I can see why people sort of, yeah, I can see how it would be really irksome to sort of spend your life like sort of really kind of like doing things in a way that it's a real craft to you, and you know, you spent your life learning exactly how this massive SSL desk works and mic techniques and all this sort of stuff. But I don't think that stuff is redundant. I don't think plugins are going to like just make that redundant. There's always going to be people who are going to want to do that, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's just great that it gives us a wider landscape of options and creative avenues. You know, they don't necessarily just have to replace each other. I think it's great that they can all exist together. So absolutely agree with you on that. I think that's a awesome place to wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah, let's do it.
So much for your time. I know
Pleasure.
That it's getting quite late. So thanks so much for coming on.
Total pleasure, Sam. Thanks for asking me.
Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, Sam. Cheers.
Thank you very much for listening, everyone. I really hope you got some value from that. Now, if you want to take Stephen up on his very generous offer of 10% off of mastering, then all you need to do is drop him an email. You can do that on tooltreesmastering@gmail.com, and just let him know in that email what it is you want to do and that you have been referred to him via this podcast, and he'll be able to sort that out with you directly. Nice and simple. Now, if you want to get in touch with me and talk about anything that we've discussed in this podcast, or perhaps you actually want to come on the show with me, then you can do that just by getting in touch via the email, which is sam@bigbeatscoffee.com. And of course, if you do want to order yourself any coffee, then you can do that at www.bigbeatscoffee.com. That's all for now. So as always, make great coffee, make great music, and make even better conversations. Take care.